I want to just set the stage with thinking about some of the reasons that people might choose to install and maintain a rain barrel. So I've got a few of them that I just came up with off of the top of my head. Obviously, reducing stormwater. So if you were able to harvest that water in between the rainfall events, and then either apply it to garden or get it underground, that reduces the amount of stormwater running off down the street and into the storm system, into the Baraboo River if you live in the Baraboo area. It can also reduce the pumping of groundwater. So within the city, if you live in the city and you're connected to city water, all that water is pumped out of groundwater and then ultimately goes to surface water, after you use it and it goes into your sanitary sewer system. That drains down to what we now call the Water Resource Center. It's basically the old treatment plant down by Effinger Road and Manchester Road, actually not too far from where Jim lives. So that wastewater gets treated and then discharged as surface water into the Baraboo River. So one of the things that rain barrels can help with is basically reduce the amount of pumping of groundwater and help preserve the groundwater for use otherwise. The other thing is to save money. Now it's not lots of money, but one of the things, anything that goes through, unless you have a water-only meter, basically that you only get charged for water usage as opposed to wastewater discharge, then you basically pay both for what's on the water meter reading, and you pay both the water charge and you also pay the sanitary sewer charge, which is about 4 times the water charge. So it's over time it adds up. If you're using that water well in between rainfall events, and you would otherwise use groundwater from the city system, that could be a cost savings over time. Not tens and thousands of dollars, but a small amount anyway. The other thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about, especially master gardeners, is the water quality. From rainwater generally is much different than what you have getting out of the tap. And again, it's more in rural settings where you have your own well. Generally, you're not applying different types of chemicals like chlorine or fluoride or potassium permanganate is another one that gets added in. But if you live in the city, a lot of times there's chemicals like that are oftentimes getting installed, usually at pretty low levels, but still at levels that can be discernible, and plants can. At least I've heard that plants can sense the quality of the water that's being put on them. Another reason I can think of is art. So there's been the last 10, 20 years I've seen a lot of people actually using rain barrels and painting them as art. So it's kind of a neat thing. Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District has been promoting art in rain barrels for probably 15 years or more. Go ahead.
There's no legal restrictions about using a rain barrel in Wisconsin. There is in California.
So what I have, there's not any, to my knowledge, there's not any governmental restrictions. I've heard, and I've not heard of any city ordinances restricting rain barrels. I have heard of some cases of deed restrictions for when the developer sets up certain deed restrictions. I've heard, and I haven't experienced them specifically, but that's the only thing that I've heard about. But there is certainly a myth about that. That to my knowledge is just a myth, other than a couple of kind of oddball situations where a developer has put certain kind of crazy deed restrictions. They don't allow for example, some developments don't allow.
There's no local ordinance in Baraboo.
Right. Correct. Yes. Right, yep. Great. So what I'm going to do, I got to highlight a couple of different things. A number of years ago, Sauk County was making these cistern rain barrels available. So some of you may have seen those. Well, the next slide I'll have a picture of that. But basically here, generally what we're doing is we're trying to get an idea, wherever we got these gutters, we want to identify spaces that we can discharge those gutters and then intercept that water. This particular one is the Earthmark rain barrel system, and this is the one that we actually have available. We've got 8 of these that we're going to have. People that register for these will have a drawing at the end. But this is the one that I learned about through Madison Area Municipal Stormwater Partnership. I've been serving on the Information Education Committee for 20 years down in Dane County, and we just started selling these earlier this past spring. So I was able to buy one and install it on my garage here in Baraboo. It's a little bit different system than the cistern that I'll show next, but this one you actually tap into the downspout. You leave the downspout in its current place, tap into it, basically steal the water out of that downspout and route it into the rain barrel. This one's got a lid that you may have seen for anybody that's entered into the drawing. So that the lid is concave right now, and that's actually how I've got it installed. So you can actually keep it concave like this and put soil in the top and then actually plant that if you're interested. So I planted some flowers and plants in there, and they've really done quite well. So it's been kind of fun anyway. Whereas the cistern barrel is just a little bit different. But so I'm going to try to do a little bit of comparison and contrasting of both of those. Most of the rain barrels that I've seen fall into these two categories. So again, there's all kinds of different rain barrels that are out there. A lot of do-it-yourself rain barrels, and those options are you can basically, but they're all generally, at least, they're pretty much either this system where you're stealing water from the downspout itself, or the cistern where you're actually discharging the water. You actually connect the downspout and then run it into the top of that particular cistern barrel. SYSTERN is the brand name for it. And there's a lot of other variations of this, but basically you're dumping water into the top, and it's got a screen. Water flows down in through that top. And there are, here you can see there's two different ports on either side, so you can actually run these in series, but if you look at the size of these, this is like an inch, maybe an 1.25 inch pipe, and if you've got a 2 inch by 3 inch downspout that's flowing full, that's one of the concerns that I have about running these is this one overflow, and if I got really heavy rainfall, this will overflow unless I actively am draining water out during an event, and so it'll splash out. It really hasn't been much of an erosion problem, but that's something to keep in mind if you have this type of a rain barrel. With any of the rain barrels, especially ones that you purchase, or and probably even more important if you do it yourself, it's really important to look at instructions. I, as a guide, oftentimes don't like to look at instructions, but I found it's probably a good idea, and you can learn by doing, obviously. But so there's obviously instructions for this. It describes the different components. I haven't seen these much available. Mine have worked out really well. I actually bought two. Ended up installing one of mine at a friend's house because she needed it. But I have heard that a few, actually just in the last couple of days, a couple of situations where even people, when they winterize them, they invert them, store them upside down, and then in the winter, they have cracked on some. I've heard stories of them cracking. Go ahead.
Is there any particular kind of leaves or pine needles that would taint the water, or it doesn't matter?
So that's a great question. I think, I'm not aware, so obviously the more leaves you have and pine needles, you can get tannic acid that come from those. But I don't know that tannic acid, obviously it'll change the pH, it'll go more acidic, but I don't know that there's enough tannic acid in there to really change your soil, be a problem for any vegetation. As long as you're not, like tons and tons of leaves, literally tons of leaves going on, I don't see that being too much of a problem. So again, this is looking at the cistern. You can kind of see there is obviously debris. So this was actually this picture. I started using this barrel probably 10 years ago, and at the time I didn't have leaf gutter, basically gutter guards on my gutters, and so I ended up obviously leaves build up in the gutters. It also builds up right here, but here you can just basically just take your hand or put a glove on your hand and scrape them out and put it in the basically put it as compost in there. So it's not really too much of a problem. If you get enough of that debris, it'll prevent water from draining down effectively. Go ahead.
What about your roof material?
Yeah. So I've got asphalt shingles, if you were, to bring up a microscope or come up really close, you'll see like the little asphalt particles. So that is something to be aware of. I mean, that asphalt, anything that comes off of your gutter is going into whatever, most of that, it's probably not a high enough concentration, with PAHs or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons is one of the chemicals in asphalt that can be a problem if you have enough of it. I haven't noticed that it's been problematic on any of the vegetation that I use my water for, but certainly that can be a potential concern. Oh, maybe I'll just, one of the things about this cistern, so this is an 80-gallon rain barrel as opposed to the 50-gallon rain barrel, and it also has, you can see where my fingers are. This is the amount of volume that's available for use between rainfall events. So from if it is filled up at the end of the rainfall event and you drain it down, you basically are able to utilize almost all of that 80 gallons, probably about 70 gallons, because there's still a few gallons in the bottom, which actually is beneficial because it helps provide effectively like ballast, so it keeps the rain barrel from blowing over in the wind. And that's something that, if you drain it down all the way to the bottom, I mean, one of the benefits of draining it down entirely between the events, you don't have that algae growth that you mentioned earlier. So, I mean, if you have water, there's always going to be, in both of these rain barrels, there's always at least some water that's going to be in the bottom. Benefit of that is it helps provide ballast. I mean, it basically keeps the rain barrel from tipping over in heavy winds. You can actually probably reconfigure this so that it drains off of the very bottom, and then have that water drain entirely out, so you don't have that potential for algae in between. But then you also need to think about basically making sure that you're securing your rain barrel probably to to wherever you've got it positioned, so that it doesn't blow over. A couple other key things that for both these rain barrel options, you want to, maybe I've got a better one here. So you want to make sure that you've got that spigot high enough for whatever you want to fill. Now, if you're filling it with a 5-gallon pail like this, that means I have to have like basically two 8-inch blocks, so it's basically 16 inches tall in order to get that taller pail there. So you want to think about if you're just doing something like this, it's you can have it down a little bit farther, but you want to think about how you're going to use that water in between. One of the gentlemen that was here earlier mentioned that he just has a hose connected here, and then he sticks it up to the top in between, and then he doesn't have to mess with the valve. That's a really great solution. The other thing I'm showing here, so this one normally, because I have peas that are under the eaves normally, and I planted peas there long enough that I probably need to move them just because there's probably stuff in the soil that is not all that great for the just the blight basically. But you can actually, like this one, I have a soaker hose. Normally I had a soaker hose. It's actually a sprinkler hose. A sprinkler hose doesn't work as well as a soaker hose. You actually need a lot more pressure, and so I actually went through and drilled like every 4 inches, and it worked really well for the first few months, but then even those drill holes ended up plugging up. So I'm going to be reinstalling the soaker hose that somebody had thrown out next door. So and the nice thing is then I'm able to water areas that wouldn't get water otherwise because they're under the eaves, and then I don't have to worry about emptying the rain barrel, by valving it out and then emptying it. It just does it all by itself if the soaker hose is working properly. And the other thing, this is not my site, but you can get more storage by running these rain barrels in series. So filling, you have, but again, one of the things that I like to give thought to is these have much smaller pipes leaving. Like I mentioned in the cistern barrel with that, just like a 1-inch hose. So if you get a really heavy rainfall, it's going to be overtopping here because you're limited here in the size that you have leaving. If you want to have an optimal system, you may actually want to look at upsizing the pipes in between the rain barrels. But again, you want to size your system to how much you really need. Go ahead.
Is there any formulas that would tell you how many square foot of roof area you're draining through? So if you had an inch of rain you know, and you have 1,000 square feet, how many gallons is it gonna collect?
Yeah, yeah, and so, you know, a lot of it's, you know, looking at what drains to that particular downspout. And so, you know, but again, you know, for my thought on rain barrels, it kind of, you want to think more about how much water, you know, you want to have enough water that gets into it that you can use in between when you don't need it. But, you know, it's also, you know, we don't have a lot of control over how often it rains, and when it does rain, this is actually a pretty good rain year in my opinion, this last year in 2022. You know, I haven't needed to use, you know, either water from our spigot or from the rain barrel all that much, because we've had pretty decent rain overall, and when you know, we've had some nice soaking rains too, which is really nice. But there's definitely, you know, a calculation you can do, just do a web search. But basically, you want to look at the surface area of your roof, you know, more of the horizontal surface area, and then identify how much of that surface area, so like square feet, drains to that spot. And if you have more typical is like a ½ inch of rainfall. If you have that over a course of a day, you know, multiply that ½ inch times the square footage of the drainage area going to that. That should, in theory, unless your roof is leaking, that should be about what you get in the rain barrel. Good question. So this is, again, now I'm jumping back to the Earthmark system, or Earth-Earthmark rain barrel system. Again, you know, and I'll pass this around. This is a really cool setup. You know, it's rubber, but you basically drill. I think it's a 2-inch hole, inch and 3/4 to 2-inch hole into your downspout, and then you basically have to kind of wedge this in. And then water, as it's going down the downspout, most of that water is actually going around, you know, along the outside of, you know, I guess inside of the downspout, obviously, if it's working right, but real close to the inside, as opposed to right down the middle. So most of the water is actually getting into this outer perimeter, and then there's a hole and again, I'll pass this around, that basically runs that water into the tube, and then that fills, you know, basically stealing water from that downspout, and then run it into the rain barrel. What's really critical is that the elevation for this downspout, so first of all, you want to actually make sure you get put whatever blocks underneath it, so you can actually fill your whether you have a pail like this or a water, a sprinkler, you want to make sure that's high enough. So first get your rain barrel set where it's, to the right height, and then you look at where you want to connect, tap into the rain barrel. And again, there's a couple of, on the side, there's actually 2 nice spots, that actually have a little dimple here. It makes it really easy. The kit actually comes with, the smaller one is for drilling into the rain barrel. And again, you have this expandable pipe that, it's basically one of these things. And then you can, it's got flex tube. So you connect that, but again, it's really critical, and this is something that you'll find in the instructions. It's really critical to make sure that that you drill this at the same elevation as the hole that you have going in, so that it actually fills it properly. And then once the water gets up to here, then there's enough pressure there that it basically forces the water to go down the middle and then out your downspout where it normally would otherwise. So it's kind of a neat feature of this particular rain barrel. Again, you can just buy the kit too if you have your own rain barrel that you want to use and have functioning. Obviously the kit normally is a lot cheaper. You can just, and they're available online. It's a lot less, but I've been really happy with mine so far. I don't know, I've only had it in since the spring, and I don't know of other people that have had them much longer. So I don't know, how long, whether they have, longevity issues like some of the cistern ones have had issues with. Again, these are generally the tools. But again, one of the real important tools is to make sure you have the instructions and you actually read them before you get started. Or otherwise, you're going to go through a lot of downspouts, right? And you could just learn by doing. I suppose it's not the end of the world, but aluminum's inexpensive for the most part. Dane County has been making these available for sale, and then so you can go to the Madison Area Municipal Stormwater Partnership. If you buy them in bulk, they're actually about $80 a piece, including shipping, if you buy them enough at a time. They're, if you buy them one at a time, it's probably close to $150 to board, partly because of the shipping. But you can also, at least through, I don't know, there'll probably be a time sometime this winter that they'll pause on making them available. But if you order them online through Dane County, through the Madison Area Municipal Stormwater Partnership, there's 2 different pickup locations, one at Middleton at their operations center, and then one at DeForest up by their compost facility. So if you're able to drive down there and pick them up, and actually, they could, obviously, this is the dimension that they are. So, I can fit both vehicles. I can fit at least one of them, potentially multiple, in the the little Prius that I've got, as well as the minivan. But yeah, so those are some of the different options. And again, Earthmark is the brand, so you could look online. I think Amazon, you can order them through Amazon as well. But there's actually a lot of different systems that all work. It's just a matter of how well they work, and do they work well for your system. Go ahead.
If you were to acquire barrels from companies that sometimes have them available, does the color make a difference as to how much algae forms in them, or is it advisable to paint them first if they come?
My opinion is no. I don't think the color. I mean, obviously, the darker it is, the more sunlight it'll retain. So the water might be warmer, and a really hot sunny day, if it's in the sun, the water might be pretty warm that you're discharging out. I guess it kind of depends on what you're putting it on. Obviously, if it's like steam that's coming out of there, it's going to kill most vegetation. If you've got it down to probably 80 degrees Fahrenheit or more, really, I don't think it should be a problem. But the things to be aware of more is depending on what was in the rain barrel. Obviously, if it was like motor oil that was in the barrel, you want to make sure you triple rinse it pretty clean. If it's there's a lot of like syrups, soda syrups, a lot of those are been around. Again, cleaning it out as much as you can, I think is important. But I don't think that the color really matters so much. Probably what's more important is the surface. If you're going to paint it, you may actually want to rough up that surface and before you paint it, and just make sure you get a paint that will adhere well to that. Otherwise, you're going to have flake paint, and it's kind of it might look really nice for a couple months and then be a problem later on. Go ahead.
My son put a rain barrel in his home.
Yeah.
And he went to Delaney's and bought an old plastic barrel. They had a ton of them last year. I don't know if there are any left, but.
Right.
And they were pretty inexpensive.
Yeah.
And they were tan colored.
Okay, yeah.
Lighter colored.
Yeah, and if anybody has locations of those, I think we'd be happy to, or at least I'd be happy to help try to make connections, and maybe we even have there's some different options. Free cycle, in Madison is kind of more of a Dane County thing, but I think connecting up those extra supplies with people that need or want those supplies, that's something that I think might potentially in our wheelhouse. I can talk with some of the Powered Up Baraboo other members, but I think that'd be something that I'd be interested in promoting. Did I have another question over here?
Well, I was just wondering, I know that the rainwater you can elect, you can use for your garden. If you try to do a greenhouse for the winter, is there a way to insulate that so it doesn't freeze, or can you also use it for drinking water, or do you have to boil that?
So I would not personally want to use rainwater for drinking water. Even and I do camping but I have a filter typically. So if you filter it or if you boil it, but again, if you've got a city water source, that's going to be a lot less that you can just use that for drinking water. That would be preferable in my opinion. And your other question was if you've got like in the winter, if you have a place to basically a greenhouse that you're using that water in, will it freeze, or so you're going to spend a fair amount of energy trying to heat that high enough so that the water doesn't freeze. You may you may be better off just figuring out a different system for the water that you're applying in the winter. Maybe we can talk more about that later on, but that gets to be a lot more complicated about trying to keep it. And again, and also, generally, if you've got a way to really insulate it well, it might hold heat fairly decent, but you're probably going to end up spending a lot of energy on heating. Just if that's the only reason you're heating it is for the water, to keep the water from freezing, you're probably spending a lot of extra money on that maybe isn't the best money spent, is my thought. One of the keys here for this rain barrel is, so this is a 50-gallon barrel. So there's actually two different spots for spigots. You could potentially put your spigot down here, but then you also need to make sure you secure your rain barrel so it doesn't tip over and become a problem. And again, because it'll obviously drain out entirely. So I've got mine just plugged at the bottom, and then I have the spigot up higher just so I don't have to have the rain barrel up as high in order to get the pail underneath it. But one of the drawbacks is you only have effectively about 30 gallons of water that you're able to use in between rainfall events. So, if you've got a bunch of these in series, that actually make a lot of sense. If you only need 30 gallons of water, then that's great. You're matching what your need is. But if you need more than that, obviously you're going to need to look at either adding more or using a different rain barrel. Go ahead.
Does the plug come as an accessory to?
Yeah. So this is a whole bunch of different items that are in here, and I think I've got this one a little bit later on, but everybody's been able to see this. So these are the supplies. They all come in a sealed bag. We'll try to make sure we get all the right parts back in this one. But yeah, I think that's all that I have. Again, you'll need a drill. But again, they actually have. These are actually pretty nice hole saws. And then I kind of showed this. So obviously, you have to. It's a little bit of a challenge to get that securely in there. You want to make sure that it's up in the right direction as opposed to downward, because it's not going to work if it's upside down. But go ahead.
What would be a good way to secure that if you didn't want to drain it?
Yeah. So if you've got, I've got my garage here, potentially, either cable around or like a metal strap that's secured to the garage would certainly be fine. Go ahead, Bill.
The big heavy rock in the bottom of it?
Yeah, that's a great thing. You could also, that's a great point, Lena, because you can put stuff in here like rocks or something. That's probably a better idea, but again, you want to make sure that it's secure in there, and that, like if it's a round rock, it might have the tendency. Go ahead, Bill.
Have you used any battery-powered pumps to transfer water?
So far I've not used any because I've been using gravity, but the nice thing about whether it's battery-powered or electric, certainly, if you could, and I've got another system that I've got that would probably potentially even make more sense later on, but certainly, if you're not going to use gravity to work to drain out, then a pump, whether it's battery operated or electricity operated, is definitely a good idea. But again, think about that's taking energy, either generally electricity, because you'll have to charge that battery. But depending on your situation, especially if you don't have gravity working in your favor, and you want to actually and that's how cisterns back when a lot of my house was from 1897 or 1896. So they actually at the time they had cisterns that were obviously below ground, and they sometimes they had little hand pumps that they pumped that water up out of the cistern. In the 50s and 60s, they basically, effectively made those cisterns illegal because there were, either kids falling in them or, just different things. And so, not a whole lot of houses, at least to my knowledge, still have those old hand-dug cisterns. But if you've got a cistern, if you have water underground, then you really need to add energy, whether it's hand pump energy or battery-operated pump or electricity-operated pump. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is there any reason that diameter in the bottom is smaller than the top?
I think the reason for the diameter down here being smaller than here is to make them stackable. So deliver these in you know, because otherwise you have you only get like 10 rain barrels in a semi-load, whereas otherwise you can get like several hundred in a large semi-trailer. So it's more, most of the rain barrels that I've seen that come pre-ordered, you know, are stackable, just more to save money on delivery and space on delivery. Great question. So a couple other things. The other key thing is if you've got leaves that are coming down your downspout, you're gonna have to, you know, clean this out on a pretty regular basis. Otherwise, this is gonna get clogged. So one of the things if you're gonna use this type of a system, you need to make sure you've got some sort of a gutter guard. This is a little bit different than the one I actually installed. Actually, C&D out of Portage did mine, and I was super happy with them. But I ended up choosing a little bit different one because of the types of leaves. So we want to look at what the trees are above and the types of leaves, you know, and our needles, because some of the needles can be really problematic as well. But you want to try to, you know, if you don't want to, you know, go out there after every rainfall and clean that out, you're going to need to, you know, consider putting in a leaf gutter guard with this system. With the other one, it's not as critical. You'll see, you know, if you go by and look at it, you'll see that debris that's accumulating. Just scoop it out and clean it up.
To clean out the piece that attaches to the gutter, do you have to unscrew it?
So I guess you can see the screws in this one. So there's and I'll jump to this one now. So like now we're starting to get beyond growing season, so I probably don't need the rain barrel anymore. So it's sometime between now and hopefully before it freezes, I'll just you know, basically pull this unit out and then put this plug in. So basically this plug then just fits right into, this is the side that goes against the downspout, and then this is the side that's sticking out. I don't really know what these tabs are on the side other than because it's not like it's not like bat wings or anything like that to my knowledge, but you know, it just has them there. Go ahead.
What holds the screw tight into the hole into the gutter?
Yeah, so it's just it's a screw that goes into the aluminum, so it goes right into the aluminum downspout. So you know, basically most of these are self-tapping screws. So that and just like you know, all the different most of the fixtures or fittings in aluminum downspouts, you know, they're just screws that literally tap into the aluminum, and that aluminum is strong enough that it generally, unless you've got someone really pulling on it, it's secure enough that it stays in place. Again, you know, you want to make sure, you know, definitely a good idea to make sure you pull this, you know, out, and then you want to drain out your rain barrel entirely. Probably I'd recommend you considering inverting it. I mean, if you can bring it inside, either to, you know, like I have typically been moving my rain barrels into my garage, which is not heated. So I mean, I still have, you know, extreme temperatures, but it's not available to the sun, and it doesn't get snow and ice on it. And but again, you know, when you want to make sure that you're you know, basically dismantling it and then putting it away for the winter, as opposed to leaving it in place. Because otherwise, if this fills up, you know, with ice, you know, it'll have the chance to split and you know, because ice expands obviously, and you know, it's not going to be good for the rain barrel. Go ahead.
So it was mentioned a little earlier, using the water into the cooler season for greenhouses, etc.
Yeah.
Something that you could do to extend the non-freezability of the water is just put a flotation device in it, like a plastic water bottle filled halfway with water, and that movement will keep it from freezing for a period of time. Probably
Sure.
do it with livestock tanks.
Right. Yeah.
Do it with livestock tanks.
Right. Gotcha. Cool. All right. I think that's all I've got on this slide. And so this is you know, we just put in our raised beds this last year. We've been working on trying to reduce the amount of lawn that we have, and actually we've had a very successful vegetable garden. But again, you know, you want to think, so this obviously would be something that I might over time just, you know, work on adding more rain barrels so that I can have either, you know, a soaker hose that runs through these, or have that you know, have that storage nearby. And again, you know, this is about 25 to 30 feet away from that one cistern rain barrel. So I need to figure out how to get water, you know, probably underneath the lawn. But if I want to use, be able to use the rain barrel water for this. But again, kind of a good recommendation, at least from everything that I've seen. If you get about 1 inch of water a week, whether it's on grass or on vegetable gardens or flower gardens, that's really optimal. You can obviously, depending on the soil type that you have, you can get more and still be successful and less than be successful. But kind of that goal is about that 1 inch of water per week. And again, kind of depends on, you have to think about, how much water you have in your rain barrel and how you're emptying it to get that water over to where you want it. But basically, think about where you want it. I do not, other than when I've seeded the lawn, I don't water the lawn for any reason, and it's been, for the most part, my lawn's been fine without watering it. But again, if the rain barrel overflows, actually that goes out over and across the lawn. One thing I'll mention too, I think I've got a picture back here. So one of the things too that it's always good to keep in mind when the garage has always had a downspout. Before the downspout was actually connected and then drained right out the driveway into the alley, and then obviously right down into the Baraboo River. I live a block and a half away from the Baraboo River. So just by moving the downspout, I obviously have to flip the gutter, but I had to replace the gutter anyway when I redid the roof. So I moved the downspout, just that 40 feet over to, I guess 30 feet over to this location. And then, before, I just had, the water was able to go across the grass, so it helps soak in, and basically there's much less water leaving the property with just by redirecting the downspout. And so whenever you have the opportunity to do that, think about where you're sending that water. If it's a spot that you can actually put a rain barrel in the future, even if you're don't have a rain barrel right now, those are things to be thinking about, and can be really beneficial long term. Go ahead.
How are you transporting or using the rain barrel water to what you have going on?
Yeah, so I'm not right now. Currently, I'm not. For this garden, so the peas that I have under the eave, I've got connected to the one rain barrel. The other rain barrel, I've been using to just water the flowers. You can see we've got some planters, and obviously there's not, because it's under the eave. We have to either use the rain barrel water to water these, or we do have a spigot, just that's connected to the water in the house. And so, generally, especially when one of us waters, it's more of the spigot, because it's just a little bit easier rather than running the valve here. So I wouldn't say that I'm using my water optimally right now. This morning my rain barrel is filled, and it's been filled for a couple weeks, so I haven't used it to its best potential yet. Go ahead.
My friend has a nice rain barrel system, and she'll collect her milk jugs throughout the year and clean them out, and then when the rain barrel's full, obviously it just rained and her garden's good, but she'll fill probably 2-3 dozen milk jugs, keep them where they're warm, and then when you get a dry period, her and her kids can go out and water in the in-between times, and then her rain barrel's empty.
Right.
For the next storm.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you very briefly just talk about why you don't want that water going into the river?
Yeah, so part of it, one of the things is runoff volume. So there's a couple of different things in stormwater. Is the amount of runoff. I mean, generally, what in most of the designs that I try to do, I try to think about what happened there before man came and improved the land. And in those situations, generally, about 90% of the rainwater that fell actually, went into the ground and either got, evapotranspirated, evapotranspirated, or infiltrated into the ground. And so trying to emulate those natural systems is generally what I found to be the best, the most optimal for reducing problems downstream. If everybody has impervious, if you pave, land, 100% of it impervious, all that water is running off. Whatever that water is running across, like streets, if there's oil and grease on pavement surfaces that are there, that water is going to pick that up, take that right down in the Baraboo River. So by basically trying to reduce the flow, keep a longer flow path, so the longer the flow path, the more time that water is going across pervious surfaces, the less water is going into the river. And that's really a beneficial. It helps to reduce flooding downstream, and it also keeps the water, as close to the surface. And if you can actually use that water either in a rain barrel or in a rain garden or something like that, that's really optimal in my opinion.